Welcome to today's webinar, How to Support Undocumented Students, Information, Resources, and Best Practices, presented by Jose Areola. My name is Greg Nagy, and I am the Virtual Learning Community Manager from The Ohio State University who provides technical support for the STEM Equity Pipeline project. Before we start the presentation, I would like to go over some housekeeping items for this webinar. This webinar is scheduled to last roughly 1.5 hours and is being recorded in order to view this presentation in its entirety later. The recorded webinar will be available in the next few days on the stemequitypipeline.org website. As you've already found out, you'll be watching the presenter present slides through the Adobe Connect interface while listening to them talk over your computer speakers. All the participants' microphones have been automatically muted. You can download the slides and other files from the Files pod. Click on the file you want to download. Click on the Download Files button. This will then open the file as a link in a different tab in your browser. The presenter will answer questions after the presentation. However, we can take questions at any time. This is how we take questions. At any time during the presentation, you may submit a question by typing your question in the chat pod at the bottom of the Adobe Connect window. We will read and respond to these questions at the end of the presentation. I would like to start the webinar by introducing Freda Walker, consultant for the STEM Equity Pipeline project. Freda?
Good morning. We welcome all of you to our webinar today. I'd like to start first by taking a poll. We'd like to know how you found out about our webinar. How'd you hear about it? And we're going to put up a poll, and you can answer. These are all the different choices that you have. And if you actually see the ones that are in black, we'd like for you to chat with us and tell us which listserv or what conference or what newsletter or what website that you learned about this webinar. Okay, Greg, let's start the poll. So just make your choice, and we'll be able to see as people answer. Okay, Greg, I think we can stop the poll. That gives us an idea of where people learned about our webinar, and I love the fact that many of you learned it from a colleague and you had an email from them. Also, we have quite a few that come in from our pipeline email listserv, and a few from the website. Okay, thank you. Oh, and I see some of you are chatting for me. Thank you, and letting me know where you learned about the webinar. Okay, the STEM Equity Pipeline project is a National Alliance for Partnership and Equity Education Foundation project. It's funded by the National Science Foundation through the Human Resources Directorate. We have 3 goals. The first one is to build the formal education capacity, and mostly so that education can provide quality professional development in the area of gender equity and STEM education. Secondly, to institutionalize implemented strategies that connect to the outcomes to existing accountability systems, and many of you work with Perkins. Also to broaden the commitment through gender equity and STEM education. We have a variety of methods. One, providing professional development face-to-face and online, teacher training, consulting and technical assistance, and we have a virtual web-based professional learning community, and hope that many of you will join us in that community. You can get involved if your state is one of the participating states in the pipeline project, and you can see we have some states that started 6 years ago, and we have new states that have come in the last 2 years: Colorado, DC, Kentucky, Louisiana, Vermont, and Utah. You can also participate with us by going to the stemequitypipeline.org site, and that's where you'll also see archived webinars. I'd like to take a second poll so that our speaker and also we'll know just among ourselves who's participating. So you can see the different choices, and remember to chat also. So Greg, let's put the poll up and see who's here. Okay, I think we can stop the poll. That gives us a good idea that we have many counselors on our webinar today, and we welcome you all. Know that you have a great influence in our education system, and also administrators and some faculty, a few agency staff, and a few of the STEM organization staff, and some others, and I hope you're chatting to me to let me know what other organizations you represent. Okay, thank you, Greg. We can take the poll down. At the end of our webinar, we do a survey, and the survey helps us to improve the webinars that we provide to you. So please fill it out. It will come up as a tab in your web browser, and you can fill it out right after the webinar. But if you don't have time today, you also will receive an email with a link so that you can fill it out. And then remember that the archive webinars you can find them on our website. You all are a great group because I can already see that you're really chatting, and I really appreciate that. We're going to be doing all the questions after the presenter has finished his presentation, and you can put your questions into the chat function, and then I will ask the presenter the questions at the end. Okay, we're ready to welcome our presenter, Jose Arellano. And Jose is a special person to me. I got to know him last spring, a little bit this summer, and he works with educators for fair consideration, and I believe that he and the people that work in this organization do a lot of educational equity work, and it's just an honor to have you here today. So it's all yours. Jose, have you got your microphone turned on? I'm going to turn mine off.
Okay, great. Can you hear me?
Sure can. Looks good.
Beautiful. Great. Well, thank you so much, Freda. Thank you so much, Greg, for setting this up and being our technical support on this webinar. And thank you certainly to everyone who's taking the time out of your Wednesday morning or afternoon, wherever you may be, to join us today. As Freda said, my name is Jose Arellano. I serve as the Outreach and Organizing Manager for an organization in San Francisco called E4FC, and I'll certainly talk a little bit more about the work that we do. So my hope today is to be able to provide all of you some best practices for how to support undocumented young people, some overview of policies, important policies and relevant policies from around the country that affect undocumented students. But really my hope is to be able to empower and to be able to embolden all of you to really be able to broaden this knowledge and to serve as folks that can spread this learning, can teach others, because certainly everyone on this webinar has access to people I never will, and students and faculty members and educators and allies from all over the country. And so as soon as we're able to continue to build that momentum, we'll continue to teach each other, ask important questions, and continue to advocate is when we're able to really push through for the undocumented folks that we're advocating for. So I'm really excited that we have an hour and a half together. My hope is that I'll be able to provide at least a broad overview, broad enough overview to give folks a really good grounding, but really my hope is that we're going to be able to get into some really great discussions and conversations about different issues that you all are facing either in your institutions, in your states, or more broadly at the national level. I certainly am not an expert on everything that is immigration or education. but I will certainly do my best to, if I don't know a particular answer, to be able to at least provide you with um, maybe a place where you can find that, or a resource of some kind. So with that, I guess I'll get started here. So a little bit about me, just so you all can get a sense of who I am. So I myself am an undocumented immigrant. I came to the United States when I was about 3 years old. I'm originally from Durango, Mexico. Came to the U.S. with my mother. We came to the South Bay in the San Francisco Bay Area. I was a little town called Mountain View, and that's where I grew up. Went on, studied in high school, graduated in 2006, and was very, very fortunate to be able to go on to college. Now, for me, I've actually always known that I was undocumented. I knew I was undocumented since I was about 5 years old. Now, certainly at the age of 5, I didn't really have the capacity to really understand the greater geopolitical ramifications of my status, why it was that I was this thing called undocumented when I didn't have papers and really understood what that meant. The only thing that I understood when I was 5 years old about what it meant to be undocumented in the United States was that I wasn't supposed to tell anyone where I was from. I wasn't supposed to tell anyone where my family was from, where I was born. And when I asked why it was that I couldn't share that with people, the only response that I got was that if anyone found out where I was from, or if anyone found out where my family was from, the people would come and take my mother and father away forever. And I had to carry that at 5 years old. This constant fear, not knowing who I could trust, whether or not I was in a safe situation, whether or not I was in a situation where I could get deported, or my parents could get deported, or my family could be separated. And so literally, growing up, I would go off to school every single day not knowing whether or not my mother and father would still be there when I got home. And I think it's really that challenge, that sense of uncertainty, and unfortunately, that reality that a lot of folks face. So as I continue to grow up and understood more and more what it meant to be undocumented, I began to ask questions about whether or not I'd be able to go to college, and what that would look like. And this was in 2005, 2006. This is definitely, it seems like a world ago in terms of the level of awareness and the level of visibility of this issue and of undocumented young folks from around the country. But in 2006, when I was asking folks whether or not I could go to college, for the most part, the answer was no. When I asked whether or not I could even apply for school, apply for college, I was told no, because I had to fill in a social security number to even apply to college. And even if I did fill out a social, was I putting myself at risk or my family at risk if I applied? And even if I did apply and was able to get accepted, how was I going to pay for it when at that point I wasn't eligible for federal financial aid, state financial aid? Most scholarships required me to be a legal permanent resident or a U.S. citizen. I couldn't do work study. I couldn't get university grants. And I couldn't obviously be employed because I didn't have proper immigration status in the United States. So, and then even if by some miracle I was able to pay for college, what was I going to do after? What was I going to do with a college degree when without immigration status I wouldn't be able to be employed, and I wouldn't be able to really pursue a graduate or professional degree? So those were all the questions that I was presented with. And actually at the same moment, 2005, 2006, as I was being presented with those questions, Kathy Jin and Carrie Evans, who are our executive directors and our co-founders, Kathy's our executive director, were facing the same questions as they were working with students as educators in the peninsula here in the Bay Area. And their answer was, let's start up a scholarship fund to try to provide at least some support to undocumented students. And so that's really the foundation of what E4FC is now. So as I said, our mission is to empower undocumented young people to pursue their dreams of college, career, and citizenship in the United States. So here is a picture of our staff. Obviously, we don't have a huge staff, but it's been an incredibly beautiful experience and an honor to be able to serve alongside these folks. What is the most powerful thing about our organization, at least in my mind, is that the entire leadership of the programming of the organization, so all the programs that we have at E4FC, are led by undocumented or formerly undocumented young folks. So it's not that just that we believe that the folks that we serve need to be undocumented, but also that the folks that are leading and implementing the programming and really guiding the direction of the organization, along with our executive director, are also undocumented as well. So it's been an incredibly powerful experience to be in that space. So from that original scholarship fund, which was, I believe, about $14,000 that Kathy and Carrie were able to raise in that first year, which was in 2005 incredibly significant, the organization certainly has grown tremendously. We still continue to give a scholarship. So we have our New American Scholars Program. We've given up to, I think at this point, $300,000 worth of scholarships to undocumented young people. We now have a legal services program that I'm really excited about, and I'll talk a little bit more about later, where we actually provide free review of students' immigration cases from anywhere in the country through our online intake. And again, I'll talk a little bit more about that. We have a really robust outreach and organizing program where we're actually able to go out into the community and provide information, provide resources to the folks where they are. We have a student support and career services program where we're able to actually support folks through their professional development, through their development in professional or graduate school. And then we have an arts and creativity program, which I'll talk a little bit more about later on. And then we have all our resources. So one thing we fully believe in is that everything that we know, both from being undocumented folks and from working with undocumented folks for a while, that everything that we know and learn, we put it on a guide and we publish on our website free to download for everyone to be able to utilize and learn from. So we have a scholarship list. It's about 30 pages worth of scholarships for undocumented young people. We have student guides, student financial aid guides, educator guides, parent guides in English and Spanish, a bunch of advocacy materials and fact sheets, many of which I actually uploaded to this webinar so folks can download it or can go on our website to download it. And like I said, a lot of student stories and creative work, which I'll talk about a little later. So the way this is kind of going to break down is I'll be providing kind of a brief overview. I obviously don't know, I can't in any way represent all undocumented young people. I can only represent me and certainly some of the statistics that we know and some of the background that we know. But my experience is my own, so it's, I think, really just important to be able to put that out there to begin with. So to be able to provide folks just some background so we're all on the same page, then I'll do some policy work and relevant laws, and then I'll talk a little bit about best practices for supporting undocumented folks, and hopefully we'll be able to get into a really great conversation once I'm done with that. Again, please continue to type out your questions as you have them. Hopefully I'll be able to answer them as we continue to move forward in the presentation, and thank you again, Freda, for being able to work through all of those questions and serve as a filter there. So I'm going to start really, really basic. So what does it mean to be undocumented in the United States? So to be undocumented is to not have legal authorization to be present to reside in the United States. Now, there are between 11 and 12 million undocumented folks in the U.S. That's a very, very large population. And there are basically two different ways that folks become undocumented. One is they enter, as we call it, they enter without authorization. So that means they cross the border, however it is that they're able to cross the border, at which point they're undocumented. The other way is people actually enter with authorization, enter with some sort of visa, and then overstay that visa because they're not able to renew it, they're not able to adjust to a different status, and so they fall out of status at that point. So it's about a 50-50 breakdown. So 50% of all undocumented folks in the U.S. come without authorization, 50% of all undocumented folks enter with authorization, with a visa, and then simply overstay that visa. So that's actually what I did. I came with my mother on, I think, maybe like a 5-month tourist visa, and obviously overstayed that by like 24 years. And then there's obviously a small population of folks that, while they're in the process of legalizing, are still considered undocumented until they're able to be approved. Now here's a national estimate, some national estimates. Now again, these are estimates because, as you can imagine, we don't have a lot of undocumented folks that are incredibly willing to tell the U.S. Census Bureau that they're undocumented. But as you can see, kind of a breakdown based on nationality of the undocumented population we have in the U.S. Now certainly a majority of the population is from Mexico or from Central or South America. But I think what's also really, really important to recognize here is that we have an incredibly diverse population of undocumented folks. We have a bunch of folks from China, from the Philippines, from East India, from Korea, from Vietnam. I've met undocumented folks from all over the world. Undocumented folks from France, undocumented folks from Japan, undocumented folks from Bosnia, undocumented folks from Australia, undocumented folks from Canada. We actually have about 75 to 85,000 undocumented folks from Canada. And so I think it's incredibly important to recognize that we can't see who is and isn't undocumented. That this issue crosses a lot of boundaries of nationality and of ethnicity. So it's really, really important for us to recognize that. Again, here's some just broader numbers. Like I said, 11 to 12 million folks in the United States who are undocumented. Under the age of 18, we have between 1.1 and 1.5 million undocumented young folks, so under the age of 18, so it's a very young population that we have. Every year we have about 65,000 who continue to graduate from high school, and then any given year we have between 7,000 and 13,000 undocumented folks that are able to enroll in college. Unfortunately, we really haven't found any accurate numbers about persistence and graduation rates for those 7,000 to 13,000, but certainly those numbers are incredibly small. I mean, significant, certainly, but still small as compared to the overall population, and I think that's the work that we're trying to do, is to bring those numbers up much higher. This is just a sample size of California, and I realize obviously everyone here is from all around the country. I put this down because actually what this does is actually it has allowed us to actually utilize our resources very strategically. So we know we have about a fourth of all undocumented immigrants in the state of California. We also know to a pretty accurate extent the population breakdowns per county. So as you can see here, here's just some samples. Here's the population breakdown of undocumented folks just in the San Francisco Bay Area, right? So what this allows us to do is actually it allows us to see, well, you have Santa Clara County, right, which has the largest population. So we can actually strategically place our resources, our outreach, figure out what areas need the most support based on both the population size, but also the geographic range, the infrastructure that's there. We have a lot of rural communities, and even though they might have a slightly smaller populations, because there is far less infrastructure, it does constitute for us more of an investment in resources and more of an investment in that area. So that's actually what we've been able to do, that it's really enabled us to do a lot statewide. So that's why I wanted to put that there. So now we're getting to some relevant policies for undocumented folks. So the first, probably most basic, is the Supreme Court case Plyler v. Doe. And it was a Supreme Court decision handed down in 1982, which prohibits, which basically is what guarantees undocumented young folks a K-12 public education. The Supreme Court found that that it's unconstitutional and illegal to deny someone a K-12 public education because they lack immigration status. The actual language of the decision said that to deny folks a public K-12 education would be to force them into a permanent underclass, and that certainly was not, at least in the estimation of the Supreme Court, what they wanted to do, what our education system is there for. So they handed down that decision. Now, the decision really doesn't say anything about higher ed, and that's where I think a lot of us come in terms of advocacy and trying to open up those spaces and say it's just as crucial for folks to be able to access higher education as it is K through 12, because we've already made a tremendous investment to support and educate folks up until 12th, up until they're able to graduate from high school. And so we need to continue that as much as possible. The biggest, probably most important program pertaining to undocumented young folks is Deferred Action. So Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, which was a policy, it's not a law and it's not an executive order, it's a policy through the Department of Homeland Security that was announced June 15th, 2012, so last summer. Now before I actually get into the actual policy, I think it's actually really, really important to be able to recognize all the work that went into passing this, or putting through this program. Now we are right now in one of the toughest times when it comes to immigration in the United States. We have in the past 5.5, 6 years deported almost 1.8 million people from the United States. And many of those folks, incredibly young people that have gone into deportation proceedings, many families that have been broken up and continue to be broken up. We have about 1,000 people that we deport a day in the United States. So that's 1,000 families that get broken. And so in the face of all of this, certainly there's been a tremendous groundswell of advocacy and a tremendous groundswell of support to try to get folks out of deportation and try to end folks' deportations. And there was really that effort that pushed through a program like this, which it's called administrative relief. And so it was really young folks, much younger than me, all over the country, who did protests, who did sit-ins, who held up city halls, who held up council meetings, who held up freeways, who stood in different legislators' offices and refused to move until the administration was able to pass something like this. And so I really want to actually honor them for the risk that they took, for the risk that we all took in continuing to promote equity and continuing to try to advocate for our communities and for our families and for ourselves. So just wanted to really honor that before we got into the actual policy. Now, DACA, as it's called, again, Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, is a Department of Homeland Security program that has a span of 2 years. It is renewable, and we are actually going to see in the summer of 2014, we're going to see the first renewal process, and we're still not sure what that looks like, but certainly we'll be able to know that hopefully with some time to prepare for it. But what it does is it offers 2 years, a 2-year work authorization for an undocumented young person who qualifies, and it offers 2 years protection from deportation. So once you are approved for deferred action, as you can follow in this chart, you get a work authorization. That work authorization could serve as your federal ID for any purposes you may need it. You can use that to go to the Social Security Administration, get a Social Security number, and with that, be able to get a driver's license, open up a bank account, do what is permissible with that Social Security number, which is different certainly than the Social Security number of, say, a U.S. citizen, in terms of benefits and access and things like that. And then access to state IDs and state driver's licenses really depend on the state, right? So we have states like California, obviously, where we were able to secure driver's licenses for DACA beneficiaries, although it did take actually it was a little harder than we actually thought it would be, but like I said, that was able to be pushed through, and states like Arizona, for example, who do not offer that benefit or do not extend that benefit to DACA beneficiaries. So it does break down state to state. So as I mentioned, DACA is not any type of legal immigration status. It is, if we're to get very technical, it is considered legal presence in the United States. And obviously, I'm not an immigration attorney, so I can't really get into the minutia of what that means in the grand scale of our entire immigration system. But it does mean legal presence. It doesn't, but it's not a legal immigration status. So really, for all intents and purposes, folks are still undocumented. They simply have work authorization and don't have to worry about deportation, at least for that amount of time. But folks cannot use DACA as a means of getting a legal immigration status in the U.S. in any way. It is not a pathway itself to citizenship, and it is temporary. So we know that if, say, for example, if a law were to pass, that law would supersede this program, or if for whatever reason Congress decided to defund the program or stop the program, that they could certainly do that. Or if there was a new administration in office in the presidency, that they could certainly push through an executive order to alter or end this program. So again, this is temporary. So it's really, really important for folks to know that. But there are, a tremendous amount of benefits to this program, as we can kind of see here. So here are the eligibility requirements. I think it's just important for folks to know. I won't go into this in too much detail. This is all on our website and all online, so folks can be able to find it. But you have to come to the U.S. before the age of 16. You have to have continuously resided in the U.S. since June 15th of 2012. You have to be under the age of 31, and that's a pretty hard limit, age cap. You have to be over the age of 15 unless you're in deportation proceedings. And yes, we do deport young people under the age of 15. So if you're under the age of 15, then you can apply at any time. And then obviously you have to be out of lawful status prior to June 15, 2012. The second set of requirements are the educational requirements. So you have to be in school, or you have to have been able to graduate from an institution that's certified or gotten a GED. Certainly being in college would qualify for that. But the biggest thing is you have to be in an accredited institution. So that actually doesn't just mean high schools, GED programs. It could also mean vocational schools, adult schools, as long as they're able to meet other requirements, and again, as long as that institution is accredited, or folks can be honorably discharged from our armed services or Coast Guard. And we certainly have a lot of folks that are undocumented that serve in our military and in our armed forces. And then the third piece is in terms of criminal record, folks can't have any felonies. They can't have any significant misdemeanors. So USCIS has a list of what they consider significant misdemeanors, things like DUIs. And then they can't have 3 or more of any misdemeanor whatsoever on their record. And then they have to prove that they were present in the United States on the day, June 15, 2012. We found the USCIS has actually been pretty reasonable and pretty flexible in helping folks with that proof. Because certainly, I mean, if I were to ask all of you, what would be your method of proving that you were present in the United States on that date? For some folks, it actually might be pretty difficult. That's not something certainly we have to think about. And it really caught us by surprise, so we weren't able to prepare really for this announcement. So the process, here's what the process looks like. We gather a whole bunch of documents. Again, on our website, we have an outline of all the different documentation that you can use to prove all the eligibility requirements that I had gone over previously. So you take all those documents, fill out the forms. One is the work authorization, one is the actual deferred action. So the I-21D, I-765W, I-765 and 765W. Put that all together with a nice $465 check to the U.S., to the Department of Homeland Security, which obviously we recognize is a lot of money. Certainly for our community, it's a lot of money, particularly when there's multiple folks in a household. So what we've tried to do, what we've done, I think, pretty well here in the Bay Area is try to support folks with that fee. We have some local economic development organizations, nonprofits, and credit unions that have began to offer no interest or low interest loans, social loans, or grants to help folks cover the DACA fees. And then there's obviously at the national level, self-help actually provides some support as well to help cover the DACA fee. So once that's all submitted and mailed in, folks will go in for a biometrics appointment where they'll get their fingerprints taken, they'll get a picture taken, and they'll just kind of have a background check done. They'll check for criminal record. They'll check to make sure you're not a part of a terrorist organization, things like that. And then basically we can go online and check the status of the petition. So, or rather of the application. So folks, the wait time really depends. We know some folks that have gotten it within weeks. We know some folks, like myself, that it actually took quite a while. So I think mine took about 7-8 months to take. And so it really just depends on, now certainly I think we're right now really past the critical moment, the critical point of, or the highest point of a lot of those applications. I think the submissions have began to slow down pretty significantly since obviously the first year of implementation. But again, that wait time looks very, very different. In terms of, there are some red flags, and I think these are actually really, really important to understand. I think we've actually done quite a great job nationally of filtering out folks and really getting them the support if they need it. So if anybody has any of these red flags, what we suggest is that they actually see an immigration attorney before they submit their DACA request. Now, I obviously, not having any of these red flags, didn't really need an attorney to fill out my DACA. I did it on my own, submitted it, got approved, and we know many folks that certainly do that. But if folks have any of these red flags, we actually very much suggest that they see an immigration attorney. Again, these aren't automatic disqualifiers for folks, but it is really important for them to be able to seek some type of counsel so that they're able to know how to pull together and respond to some of these on their record. So again, one is any criminal history or contact with law enforcement, any gang involvement or gang associations, gang affiliations, any contact certainly with immigration officials, any previous travel outside of the U.S. since arrival. So for example, I arrived in the U.S. when I was in 1992. So if I was to leave the U.S. at any point after 1992 and then returned, that's the type of stuff we want to take a look at. Again, it's not a disqualifier. We know a lot of folks that have left for a short period of time and then came back. As long as that period didn't happen in that 5-year continuous window that was required in the eligibility requirements. And then any use of false documentation, fake social security number, fake driver's license, things like that. Now again, USCIS is not interested in figuring out who was working with a fake social or who was working with fake papers and who wasn't. That's not the point of this at all. USCIS does recognize that if you've been in the United States for a certain amount of time, if you're undocumented, you've had to figure out some way of earning a living, of working, and of getting around. So that's not what they're trying to get at here. What they're really trying to get at is whether or not this becomes identity fraud. So whether or not someone used a fake social to, say, take out a mortgage or take out a private loan of some sort. That's where it actually gets into iffy territory. So again, there's no way of really knowing. If this is the case for you, then certainly seeking some advice from an immigration attorney would be helpful. In terms of resources, we have a ton. Again, these are all housed on our website, and again, I did in this platform upload some of our DACA resources so all of you can take a look at it. But on our Dreamer intake, so the intake service that we do to review folks' immigration cases, we actually also do review of DACA, so we can actually let folks know what their status is for DACA. We have a step-by-step guide, which is incredibly comprehensive. It takes folks through thinking about whether they should apply, to applying, to what they should do after. And we also have a post-DACA guide, so Got DACA Now What guide, where it actually helps folks figure out, well, now that we have DACA, now that we have a social, how are we able to do certain things, like get a driver's license, what is my social good for, what is it not good for, things like that. So again, that's all up on our website and free to download for all of you to utilize. In terms of other resources, USCIS.gov/childhoodarrivals, that is home base that's where you'll find the request forms, that's where you'll find directions, that's where you'll find where you mail it. Another really great resource is We Own the Dream. So We Own the Dream is a really fantastic resource for folks who actually, one, they have a screening tool on the website. They also have a directory of legal service providers all over the country that have been screened, that are credible. And then we also have an application, actually. It's called Pocket DACA, so you can download onto your mobile device, and folks can access updates about DACA information. And there's also, I think, a screening tool on the application as well, on the app itself as well. Overall, we're looking at a total population up to this point of about over 450,000 folks that have been already approved for deferred action in obviously a little over a year that the program has been in implementation. We've had a little over 550,000, I believe, apply in total. And of those applications, only about 19,000 have been rejected. So the application, for whatever reason, was incomplete, or they weren't able to review it. And then of that total number, again, only about 6,000 have been actually denied. So 450,000 approval, 6,000 denied. That's actually a really phenomenal approval rate. And of the folks that have been denied, we only know of like maybe a handful that actually were put in deportation proceedings thereafter. So for the most part, even for folks that have gotten denied, we haven't gotten a lot of news about those folks being placed in deportation proceedings afterwards. Just certainly have not done anything with them thereafter. So again, that's a little bit about DACA, well, a lot about DACA. Hopefully that'll provide folks kind of a good background. Did want to go over the spectrum of state policies that affect undocumented folks, and there certainly is a lot. We have states that have been incredibly supportive to undocumented young folks. So we have right now about 16 states that offer in-state tuition for undocumented young folks. As you can see, here's the list. All of these were passed by state legislation, except for Rhode Island, Hawaii, and Oklahoma. Those were Board of Regents decisions. I think our most recent state is Michigan, so great for Michigan. And right now, I believe New Jersey is trying to pass an in-state tuition bill for the state of New Jersey as well. So our hopes go out to the folks in New Jersey, and hopefully New Jersey will be able to join that. We have 2 other states that offer in-state tuition to DACA beneficiaries only, so it's not all the way, but it certainly is more than they had before, so Massachusetts and Ohio, so we certainly applaud them. And then we have 5 states that have been able to take it a step further, that have been able to offer state-based financial aid to the undocumented folks, in their states. So California, New Mexico, Texas, Minnesota, Illinois. Minnesota being the most recent state that has been able to pass some type of state-based financial aid. Here in California, ours is called the California Dream Act. Last year was the first year of major implementation for the state-based financial aid. We had about 28,000 undocumented folks apply for state-based financial aid for the very first time from the state. So it's tremendously exciting. Our hope this year is we can increase that number. We know there's far more students here that could utilize that support, but it's been a really tremendous step forward for us as a state, and certainly for all the states that have been doing that as well. And then on the other side, we certainly have some states that have been far more restrictive in their educational policies to undocumented young folks. So we have states that prohibit in-state tuition, so no matter what, an undocumented student going to a public school in Arizona, Georgia, Indiana cannot pay in-state tuition, have to pay out-of-state or international rates. And then on the far end, we have 3 states that have actually put in place bans for undocumented folks. So South Carolina, Alabama, and Georgia have put together bans, so undocumented folks are not able to enroll in any public institution of higher education in the state. And then in Georgia, it's only the university system, so the top 5 public institutions where undocumented folks are not able to enroll. Certainly there is, even in those states, a tremendous amount of movement to try and continue to support undocumented folks. I just got back from Atlanta not too long ago and had a chance to meet with folks from Freedom University. If folks haven't heard about it, it's a tremendous effort. So basically, after the ban went into place in 2008 in Georgia, folks, faculty members and students came together and actually began teaching college classes anyway. To the undocumented students so that they could continue to learn. So it's been really a tremendous model for folks not being stopped by even what is a tremendously restrictive ban on their enrollment. And then we have CIR. So as of last winter, we have been all hands on deck trying to pass comprehensive immigration reform for the first time really in about 30 years. Again, we have 11 to 12 million undocumented folks in the United States, and it has been really tremendous to see all the organizations, advocacy organizations, faith organizations, Chamber of Commerce, tech companies, immigrant rights groups, all different social justice groups come together to really advocate for what is something that affects all of us, which is our immigration system and being able to push through comprehensive immigration reform. As of now, just as a quick update, obviously this could be its own webinar by itself, but just as an update to everyone, we were able to pass a Senate bill with a supermajority in the Senate last late June, and now that effort sits in the House, where folks are still continuing to debate, continuing to push for some type of House bill that can come out of that can come out and ultimately be able to be pushed through before this legislative session is over. Now, again, we don't have a lot of time to push that through, but to be able to do that. And here's some really great resources for folks if they want to continue to learn more about what's going on with immigration reform. But we know certainly, even if we're not able to pass immigration reform this year, we certainly know and are ready to gear up for next year or the following year. This is not something that is just going to stop and go away. We know that this is something that we need to do for, certainly for our immigrant communities, for every immigrant that's going to come after, but also for our entire society, us as a country of immigrants. So we are going to continue to push, and really, in my mind, it's really just a matter of when and how are we able to prepare ourselves for being able to legalize what is going to be a lot of people, and what are we going to do with all the students once they're able to get some type of legal status as they begin to certainly go into our education systems. So we have a few state policies that actually I wanted to highlight again here in California, because there's actually some grounding, and we'd love for other states to be able to push through stuff like this as well. So four major provisions. One was a law here in the state of California that will actually allow undocumented folks to practice law, to actually enter the California State Bar and become attorneys, again, if they're eligible through all other means. We passed our first driver's license bill. California used to offer driver's licenses to anyone regardless of status, but now it requires a bill for that to go through. So starting in 2015, that'll go into implementation. AB 4, which is otherwise known as the Trust Act, actually limits the collaboration between local law enforcement and Immigration and Customs Enforcement, which our hope is that that will significantly limit the amount of deportations in our state. And then AB 1050, which actually allows students to pay in-state tuition if they're enrolled in concurrent programs. So they're in high school, but they're also taking classes at a community college, that they can pay in-state tuition at that community college as well. And then, like I mentioned, our in-state tuition bill is AB 540. We've had that since 2001, and the California DREAM Act is our state-based financial aid. So that is policy, and so thank you all so much for following along. I saw a lot of folks are typing in questions, so I'm excited to get to those. So the next piece is just about best practices for how to support undocumented folks. First one is being able to connect to legal services. Now, we may all be undocumented, but all of our statuses look very, very different, right? Depending on country of origin, depending on when we came, depending on the composition of our family, depending on marital status, depending on all these factors, different circumstances in our lives. So it's incredibly important for folks to get their immigration case reviewed. Now, we've reviewed about 1,300 cases in the past 2-3 years at E4FC through our online service. And what we've actually found is a quarter, about 25% of all those students who filled out the intake actually had an immigration remedy that they didn't know about. And we're talking about an immediate remedy. So within 6 months, these folks had some type of remedy that they were able to get to actually be on a pathway to legalization. So, which is an incredibly high number, and literally because we don't have access to legal services, either because they're simply not present in our communities or because they're really prohibitively expensive, we're not able to know what pathways exist in the current system. And the younger that folks are able to actually get their case reviewed, the more options they actually have for being able to legalize, or at least start the process. So by the time they're much older, or by the time they graduate from high school, they're actually able to gain some type of immigration status, which obviously is going to support them hugely in moving on with their education. So like I said, our online intake, that should be the very, very first thing. If you work with undocumented students, find out someone who's undocumented, that should be the very first thing that you bring folks to. Tell them, go online. It's a questionnaire. You fill them out, turn it in, and within 2 weeks, we'll get back to you with a pretty comprehensive review of the immigration case. And there, as you can see, is our legal services manager. His name is Krishna. He's a phenomenal legal mind and a really good friend of mine. Obviously, one of my best friends. And so, if you have any questions, please feel free to email him. There's this email right there, krishna@d4fc.org, and it's also online at our website. The next is being able to find scholarships. So obviously, even with DACA, even here in the state of California, with financial aid through California Dream Act, folks are still going to need a tremendous amount of support to get through and be able to pay for college, as we see the cost of college becoming more expensive every year. So we have a list of scholarships, as I had mentioned. It's right here. I've also uploaded it on this platform. And we actually just recently updated it. So we would love for folks to take a look at it and actually use it as a model for being able to pull together a scholarship list in your local area. We've had a lot of regions in the country be able to utilize that list and then pull together their own list in their areas or in their states even. So we really want folks to utilize that as a template. There's also things like IDA programs, individual development accounts, which undocumented folks can access, where it's really just basically a super high yield savings account. You save a certain amount of money, the organization or credit union will actually match and then give you the total amount for your educational costs. Certainly continuing to ask for private and community or online sponsorships. For example, a very good friend of mine who also wanted to attend Santa Clara University where I went, but wasn't able to get enough aid to be able to go there the first year, basically went around to her local city, which is here in San Jose, and basically asked all the local companies, all the local small businesses, if they would sponsor her first year. And they actually did. She was able to raise about $20,000 for her first year at Santa Clara. And so certainly I don't imagine that's always going to happen, but asking even if it's just to local communities, local church, local anything can support folks. And certainly being able to now work legally with DACA is going to support a lot of folks as well to be able to support their costs for school. The other thing we suggest is to be able to connect folks to undocumented folks that have already gone to or have already graduated from particular colleges or institutions. So what we actually find is they're going to be the best resources, right? Not me, not E4FC, but really the folks that have had to grind, have had to find allies, have had to find resources in that area or at that school. So as you can see here, this is actually a group of our outreach team. These are the folks that actually go out into the community and provide information, resources, inspiration to all the undocumented folks here in California and in the Bay Area. And so we really, if you know anyone who has gone to college, have them come back and talk to your students, or if you know someone at your college, be able to empower them to go back into their community and to provide presentations or to provide some type of resources. Because what we found is actually not only are these folks the best resources, but they're also an incredible source of inspiration. That every time that I've been able to speak and I stand in front of a group of parents or stand in front of a group of parents or undocumented young folks, sometimes really young, and I say, hey, look, I'm undocumented, this was my pathway, and I was able to not only go to college, but I was able to graduate from college. That literally having someone standing in front of them as a really powerful manifestation of what is possible in the face of what we've constantly been told is not possible can be incredibly transformative. So I wanted to reach out to you there. We've also, on very limited occasions, gone out and done presentations in other states, Illinois, Minnesota, Oklahoma, New York several times. I'll be going out to actually Philadelphia in a couple of weeks to present at a conference there. And so certainly we have done that in the past, and certainly we would love to do more of that, but obviously it's a little more challenging to be able to do that at a national level. But the more interest that we get, the more we have to actually take that into consideration. Next is support to parents. So so these are my parents. So this is my mother, and that's my father, and that's actually me on the day of my college graduation. So this was certainly a really amazing day for me to be able to share with my family and with my parents. Growing up, even though my parents don't have a formal education, my father has 5th grade education in Mexico, my mother has an 8th grade education in Mexico, and that's really about it. I'm the first person in my entire family to attend high school. So high school graduation was a big deal in my family. They didn't even really know what to do with my college graduation. 4 years later, they were wondering why I was graduating again. They were all confused. But this was really an important moment to share with them, because growing up in my household, education was the most important thing. And again, without a family or a household that had a formal education or the outcomes of a formal education or a professional household, education was always the most important thing. My mom would always get so excited in the mornings when I would go off to school. And I never could really figure out why. Why was she was so excited? I was really groggy. I was really sleepy. I didn't want to go to school. I didn't like my teachers, all these different things. And yet she was just so unbelievably excited for me whenever I would go off to school. And really what it was that there were no schools in my village in Mexico. And for my mom, the fact that I had the opportunity to go learn for 8 hours a day for free was the most revolutionary idea. And she was so jealous that I had that opportunity. It was something that she never really had and wished that she had. And that was really why we came to the United States, to be able to give me that opportunity and that chance. Same with my father. I remember when I was in sophomore in high school, and my dad works at a hotel. He wasn't getting a lot of hours at his hotel. We didn't really know if we had enough money to pay for our electric bill, to pay for the car, to pay our rent, to pay and have enough for food. I mean, there's all these different things. And I remember coming up to my dad and asking him or telling him, "Hey, Dad, look, I need to work." At that point, I was just a student in high school. I wasn't working, and I told Dad, "Hey, look, Dad, I need to work. We really can't keep living like this. We need some more money in the household. So, I mean, I'll go to school, I'll work at night, and I'll figure out some way of getting my homework done. I promise I'll keep up my grades, but I need to. We really just need more money." My father, who's really a really happy and a really optimistic, funny guy, and he got real serious with me for the first time really in his entire life. And and he told me, "Look, Mijo, if you really want to support this family, go to the table and finish your homework." And so my dad actually took on another job, another full-time job on top of his full-time job, to be able to get us through that rough time, and to be able to support us. This was an incredible moment, like I said, to share with them, because it's really their sacrifices, them leaving their country, their families, their culture, everything that they knew, to come here and to be able to give me a chance. And that is actually most of the parents that I've met in the course of doing this work have all wanted the same thing for their children. And so we actually do a tremendous amount of work with parents. We do a lot of educational work. We do a lot of presentations. And we actually invite parents to lead, to actually be at the forefront, to help advise and support other parents who don't have access to the information that they do. Because really, when it comes from other parents, we found that it's incredibly powerful and very transformative. So it certainly is not easy to be undocumented in the United States. As I had said, this particular issue, the issue of being undocumented, of not having legal immigration status, really just being an immigrant in the United States, comes with an enormous amount of stigma and comes with a very long legacy in the United States of both restrictive policies, but also huge cultural backlash. And we're obviously feeling the full brunt of that right now. And so because safe space is such a difficult thing for us as a community to find, we invite folks to actually work on trying to create safe spaces in all the ways that they can. One way that we also tell folks is to be aware of what we call citizenship privilege. So citizenship privilege, just like all privilege, just like male privilege, just like white privilege, is something that you were given. If you happen to be a U.S. citizen of this country, something that you were given, that you didn't work for, you didn't ask for, you didn't earn, it was just given to you. It just so happens to be that you were born in this particular geographic area at this particular time. And what that offers is it offers power, it offers influence, it offers benefits that other folks in the U.S. don't have. And so to be, what you do with that power certainly is up to you, but to be very cognizant of the things that you have access to because you have a social, because you have legal immigration status, because you have a driver's license, things like that, to be very aware of that. To be very aware of language. So we definitely want to not, we also tell folks to not say things like illegal or illegal immigration or illegal alien, that do not contribute to a culture and a language that really dehumanizes folks, that criminalizes folks, but that you actually use your language to really humanize, to be able to invite folks and recognize and honor folks who happen to be undocumented. So certainly in terms of language, we say undocumented. Sometimes you can say, not having immigration status, or folks have come up with more creative things like aspiring citizen. Here we use our in-state tuition law as kind of a go-between, as a safe thing. So we say AB 540, and folks kind of know what that means here. To actually be respectful of confidentiality, that if someone reveals to you that they're undocumented, to make sure that you let them know that you won't share that with anyone, because that's really, really important, especially if someone shares that with you. Along with that, to not ever actually ask folks to self-identify in any way. So we definitely don't want any situations where you ask out loud for folks, if you're undocumented, raise your hand, or if you're undocumented, get up and go to another room, or if you're undocumented, stand up, things like that. So that we definitely want to avoid that. What we actually tell folks to do is actually provide resources to everyone. If you have an article or a resource or a copy of this webinar or a guide, whatever that might look like, offer it to all your students, because even if they're not undocumented, they may know someone who's not undocumented, they may have a friend, they may have a family member who's undocumented, who could really, really benefit from that information as well. And in addition, by doing that, you've just identified yourself as an ally or as someone who's safe. And so if now I need to go to someone, or if I have a question, you've already identified yourself publicly without publicly identifying me as a student. We always advise folks to actually be able to create a physical space. So sometimes teachers will do it in their classrooms or in their offices. They're kind of known as kind of the gathering place. We have some institutions of higher education that are actually created specific spaces for undocumented folks. For instance, UC Berkeley, De Anza, here in California, have actual dream resource centers. So actual physical spaces with office supplies, with computers, with space for folks to come in and convene and do their work and get resources, all dedicated to undocumented folks. So that's always really great. Having a point person or finding a point person is really, really important, particularly when there's a lot of questions and folks don't know a lot. Having someone at your institution or in your organization or in your community that's knowledgeable, right? So right now, all of you listening to this are now those knowledgeable people, at least to a certain extent. So being able to identify those folks, or identify yourself as someone who knows something or is able to guide folks or is able to answer questions, is really, really important. And again, being able to put up books, stickers, bookmarks, t-shirts, anything that can signify in a nonverbal way that you're an ally and you support folks. In terms of the one-on-one interaction with undocumented folks, one thing we always tell folks to remind the students, the undocumented youth that they work with, is to remind them that they're not just undocumented, right? So I might be undocumented, and certainly given the work that I do, it's a huge part of who I am and my identity, but it's not all of who I am, right? I'm a brother, I'm a son, I'm a Zen Buddhist, I am a huge athlete, I am a guitar player, I am a huge poli-sci nerd. I mean, there's all these things that make me who I am. And we want to be able to allow folks to actually have the ability, oftentimes the privilege, of being able to know that they're complex human beings with dreams and aspirations and desires and all that good stuff. Being able to actually reframe the issue in a fundamental way. So being able to shift the conversation from you don't deserve this or you don't belong here to you belong here, and an education, you deserve an education just as much as anyone else does. Being able to find a sacred space, and the way we define sacred space is literally just any place or anything, any activity where folks feel 100% accepted for who they are. And we believe that that's an incredibly important exercise, one, because we don't often have those spaces, and B, we just want folks to know what it feels like to be actually 100% accepted for who they are. Tell folks to learn how to dream again. One question that I ask a lot of youth that I work with is, if you were to, if I was to snap my fingers and tomorrow morning you were a U.S. citizen, what would you do, right? So being able to start there and then move into what is their dreams and their aspirations, being able to make allies with other folks, and certainly you can serve as facilitators to that, and then actually connecting to emotional, mental, and spiritual support. As you can imagine, the stigma that comes with the trauma, the suffering, the instability, all that comes along with being undocumented leaves its mark on all of us. And being able to find some way of being able to seek some really deep emotional and spiritual support for that experience, whether that's in community, whether that's professional counseling, whether that's indigenous healing, whether that's a religious practice, whatever that might be, that actually is incredibly crucial to folks' persistence and their being able to maintain themselves as healthy people. Storytelling is a huge part of what we do here. As I said, we have a website. It's called thingsillneverstate.org. It's an incredible collection of poems, creative writing, of videos, of music, of photos from undocumented folks all over the country, all an expression of what it means to them to be undocumented in the United States. So we definitely encourage you to go on to share that with your students and your parents and folks in your community as a source of inspiration. We also want you to be an advocate. We recognize that even if we're able to get folks enough support, they're able to go through the educational system and graduate, they're really ultimately what we want is citizenship. What we want is a pathway for folks in the United States to be able to become fully contributing members of our society and to be full participants. And we really, and in our minds, citizenship is the way to do that. So we have an advocacy platform we actually just recently published. So we'll be working on educational access work and also immigration work as well. We also have a conference coming up that I would love to invite everyone to. It's our third annual educator conference. So it will be at UC Berkeley here in the Bay Area. It'll take place January 25th, 2014. I, again, uploaded the flyer here. It has all the information. It has the registration there. Registration closes on January 10th. We would love to have you come and attend and network and meet folks and go to really some tremendous workshops for educators and allies of undocumented young people. And actually for folks coming from out of state, please feel free to email me if there's any kind of support we can offer in terms of the conference fee. I know that it's a lot to even just fly or travel and then have lodging to come to a conference like this, but we certainly want to be able to support you as best we can. So anyway, that's there, and we'd love to have you attend. And then the final piece is faith. So this is me again. So as you can see, I'm the little dude on the horse, and the guy that's my dad behind me. And in the lower left-hand corner, you can see that's me again with my mom. And if you can actually see in the background, the little white dot, that's my village. So that's actually where I was born, middle of the desert. And then the picture on the left-hand side, or sorry, on the right-hand side, as you're seeing it, is actually really cool. That's actually a picture of me the very first night that I arrived in the United States. So faith. Faith is the ability to believe that something can change or that things are going to happen when you have absolutely no concrete reason to believe that it will, but you believe it anyway. My parents coming to the United States, to a brand new country, brand new culture, undocumented, had no reason to believe, none whatsoever, no evidence to base it on, no reason to believe that their undocumented son would eventually go on and get a full academic scholarship to Santa Clara University and graduate with a degree in political philosophy, history, and ethnic studies, right? There's no reason for them to believe that that was going to happen, but that's exactly what happened because they fully believed it. That faith is really what serves as the basic foundation for all of our communities. The reason why, even in the midst of so much hardship, so much suffering, so many challenges, why our communities, why our families are so unbelievably strong and resilient is our faith. It is our belief in a world that is different than the one that we have right now, and how much we're willing to work and sacrifice to get to that place. That is what my family, that's what my parents did for me. And that's what I have tried to do as best I can in my capacity here for the undocumented young folks here in the Bay, here in California, all over the country as best I can. If you're able to instill or rekindle the ability to believe, to have faith in any undocumented young person, it could actually be the most transformational thing ever. So with that, I am done. Fred, I don't know if you want to come back on. Again, here is my email address. Please utilize it as best you can if I can help support you in any way. Thank you all so much for listening. And Freda, if you will come back on and help me with questions, we'll move it from there.
Hey, Jose, thank you so much. It was an excellent presentation. And it is time for questions, but I think because I'm echoing off of your
Oh, you want me to put myself on
mic.
mute?
No, I think what I might ask you to do is to read the questions yourself. I have them up on in the notes section, but if
Okay.
you read them out loud, it'll get recorded. Can you read them or not?
I can.
Never mind, I'll read, you mute while I read, and then you answer.
Okay.
Okay. The first question is, what is the source of information used to obtain the estimated numbers of undocumented people in California?
So I believe it's the I believe that if you're talking about the population breakdowns per county here in California, I believe that was the Pew Hispanic Center. I believe is the source of that. I can look it up. I'm not terribly confident in that, but I believe that's what it was. But if you want, I could definitely, you can email me. I can send you actually just the report itself.
Okay. The next question is, DACA for all undocumented people are only dreamers?
So deferred action is for anyone who qualifies. So a lot of the eligibility requirements are kind of a reflection of the requirements for the DREAM Act in many ways. So the age cap, the educational requirements are fairly similar, but there are some folks who would qualify for DACA that maybe won't qualify for the DREAM Act. I mean, so there's different things. So again, it's available to any undocumented person who qualifies under the eligibility requirements.
Okay. I'll ask you to mute. Okay, this question, there are 2 or 3 people who have weighed in on this, so I'm going to read all of it to you. I heard that students who have attained DACA can qualify for federal student loans, but not for grants for college. Is that true? And then someone answered, unlikely, since federal student loans you must file for FAFSA, and for DACA students they're not able to apply for the FAFSA. And then I've heard that students with DACA are not eligible for financial aid. So could you speak to that topic, please, or that issue?
Yes, absolutely. So, excuse me. So DACA does not, so a DACA beneficiary is not eligible for federal financial aid. So whether that's federal student loans or FAFSA, any type of federal aid. So I think just to be kind of clear on that, right? Because DACA is not a legal immigration status in any form, it doesn't provide folks financial aid. Now, where that does break down is per state. So obviously we have 5 states that do offer state-based financial aid to undocumented folks. There are many institutions that offer financial aid to undocumented folks. Oftentimes that requires us to do kind of individual research, institution per institution, but for the most part, when it comes to federal money, undocumented folks are not eligible for it, regardless of whether they have DACA or not.
Okay, I'll have you mute. Thank you. Do you need to be full-time student to qualify for DACA? And if you withdraw mid-semester for some reason, do you suddenly lose? I think lose your status.
Right. Right. So I believe for the educational requirement, you do need to be full-time. However, full-time is kind of what's the word I'm looking for? However, they define full-time based on the institution, whether that's a GED program, whether that's a adult program, whether that's college, whatever that might look like. So, and if you were to withdraw, that really depends on where you are in the process. I think if you are approved, if you're approved if you have your DACA approval and then you drop out for whatever reason, I think that's fine. They're not going to do any follow-up work. You're not going to lose your DACA at that point. You just have to be in a educational system to qualify for applying in the first place. Yeah, and obviously that gets into some really, obviously, some particulars when it comes to individuals and their institutions.
Okay. Here's our next question. What about high school students who are DACA eligible, apply, and then either during the application process or after they receive it, they drop out or don't graduate? Are they still eligible? If they haven't, if they have it, does it get revoked? The DACA eligibility?
Right. So again, I think this is similar to the previous question. Folks have to be enrolled in an institution, an accredited institution, when they apply in order to be eligible for DACA. If they are not in an institution of education that's accredited, they are not eligible for DACA.
Okay, and I think that the next question also relates to what you've already been talking to, but I'll read it. My understanding is that these issues of not being enrolled will possibly hurt them when the 2-year period comes and they have to reapply. That could stop for renewal for their DACA status. Do you have additional comments on that?
We don't know, because we don't know
okay.
what the renewal process will look like, so that might be a possibility, it might not.
Let's see, this is a notation. Please note that if students receive their DACA, they cannot use their Social Security number for scholarships or college applications. And will you confirm that?
All right, so this is a really complex situation. So I'm going to try as best I can to provide some conciseness. There's also a lot of ambiguity, so it's kind of hard. So in terms of, so let me answer the question about the scholarships first. That'll be a little easier. So scholarships, if they're oftentimes private scholarships, will have a Social Security requirement, or will even have a requirement that they be a U.S. citizen or resident of the U.S. What I tell students, honestly, is to apply anyway, because actually even if you don't qualify, the worst thing that they're going to say is no, right? You're not eligible for our scholarship. You'll have to apply elsewhere, so that's fine. But what we actually do find that happens is folks apply and then actually are selected as finalists or even receive the scholarship, and then when they reveal their status to the scholarship provider has very often actually thought about changing their eligibility requirements, or taking off the Social Security requirement, or taking off the residency or U.S. citizenship requirement, because they've simply never had undocumented folks apply before. So that's generally what I say to folks. If you have a social through DACA, put it down. But if the requirement is that they be a resident or U.S. citizen, folks with DACA still would not qualify technically in those cases, right? So that's a conversation you'll need to have with the scholarship provider. In terms of college applications, we know of definitely certain institutions and certain educational systems that do require folks to put down a social if they have one. So but we also know that you do not need to put down a Social Security number in order to apply to most institutions of higher education in the United States and have your application reviewed and be accepted. So what is actually more important is what happens after. So if you do have a Social Security number through DACA and you put it on your application, what sometimes will happen is, and we've certainly had it happen here, what sometimes will happen is that the school, because you have a social, will automatically qualify you as a resident of California. And in some of those cases, basically the system just gets really confused, because you have a social, but you don't have legal immigration status in the U.S., or you're not a U.S. citizen, but you don't have temporary status either. So the systems often are just not equipped to really understand the complexity of a program like DACA. But we often hear from institutions that they do require that you put one down if you have one. So the best thing that I can say is, if you do put down a Social Security number it is incredibly important that you actually follow up with the institution to see how that student was processed, and to see, because oftentimes they'll be put into certain situations where they'll be made eligible for certain things when they're not eligible, or they won't be eligible for certain things when they are eligible. So what you actually really need to do is you need to, if you put down the social in your college applications, make sure to follow up with the institution that you are going to attend, and see how you were processed, see how your systems recognize you in that system, and make sure it's accurate. That's the best thing we can say. And again, our hope is that as more and more DACA beneficiaries are applying, that our systems of higher ed are becoming a lot more sophisticated and being able to actually say, okay, this is an undocumented person that has DACA, doesn't have DACA, and can
Okay, our next question. If a person receives a Social Security card or a number and a card, I'm going to ask you to mute. It's okay. If a person receives a Social Security number or card while on a visa, is it still good if they overstay their visa or their visit? These are tough questions, huh?
Yeah, I am. So again, I am not an immigration attorney. So, and I think in that case, I mean, that's actually a pretty complex question. So I'm actually not, I'm not in any way qualified to answer that particular question. Sorry. But if you email Krishna, our legal service
next
manager.
Question. What suggestions are there to remind DACA students the importance of pursuing certificate or any degree? This is requirement for them. This was requirement for them obtaining DACA. Was this, I think, a requirement for them to obtaining DACA? I'm not sure about the last part of the question. Okay. Can you see it there? Just what suggestions are there to remind the students the importance of pursuing a certificate or a degree?
I'm muting. Yeah, I mean that breaks down in a lot of ways depending on who the student is and your relationship to the student, things like that. I would say something that's really important is to connect them to role models, to be able to show them folks that have been able to make it through. Like I said, on our website, we have a lot of stories of incredibly successful, incredibly powerful individuals who have not only gone on, done their thing in education, graduated, but also have gotten incredibly involved in the community, have started up local groups, have gotten involved with immigrant rights, have done a tremendous amount in terms of leadership in their communities. And I think being able to see that in so many ways is really, really powerful. I mean, seeing role models and seeing possibilities of what's different and what's possible is absolutely incredible. And being able to point them to resources. I think oftentimes for us, especially as like first generation folks and as immigrants, folks that are new to this country, I mean, just the sheer magnitude of even the education system, which is only one institution that we have to interact with, is huge. So being able to actually help them work through that system in a very concrete way, and tell them that you believe in them and all that good stuff, can make a huge difference. On top of actually telling them if you did, you would qualify for the social, and you would also qualify.
Thank you. Here's the next question. You mentioned that it is best to apply and seek information for DACA. What would be the suggested age? For applying?
The suggested age for when? Well, you have to be older than 15 to apply. So that would be the suggested age to start. But even if, so say for example, someone is 14 now, they'll qualify when they turn 15, but they'll also need to prove 5 years of continuous residency in the United States, or 5 years residence in the United States. So what's good is being able to actually prepare for that. So make sure you have documentation, whether it's transcripts, whether it's attendance records, whether it's medical records, whether it's bank statement, whatever, to prepare for the point where they will become eligible, whether they become eligible through age or whether they become.
Okay. This is a question I had when you were talking about states, and then some other people weighed in on a few things. But do you have any ideas on how to move states to support undocumented students in their education? I noticed that different states were coming on board for different aspects, but what can people do locally to help move states forward?
Yeah, I mean, what we find is, particularly in this kind of overall very complex issue of immigration, right, which is one of the most complex and heated and controversial issues that we have to deal with as a society, that schools and education are still a really great focal point, a really great gathering place, right? That for teachers, they're focused on making sure that their students have the best education possible, regardless of whether or not they have status, right? And certainly there are some exceptions to that, but for the most part, that's what we find. And so being able to move states to push forward policies like this, it needs to happen at all levels. So I would ask what level you're at and what sphere of influence you have, right? So if you're an administrator, if you're a college chancellor or university president, being able to utilize your influence to actually be able to, say, push forward institutional policies, right? Or convene your entire district or your entire system and bring up these questions that you have that influence, right? If you're a faculty member or a counselor at a university, being able to actually connect with students, like, are there undocumented students on your campus? How many? How are they being served? What supports are there available on your campus for those things, and being able to bring up those questions. What we have in a lot of university campuses is task forces have been pulled together of different faculty members, staffs, and students, and they have actually driven a lot of things forward at the policy level when it comes to institutions. Now, when it comes to the community, if you're a high school teacher or if you're a community member or an ally, being able to figure out what are the supportive organizations in your local community that are doing immigrant rights or are supporting undocumented young folks in some way, and then being able to connect to those efforts, and then being able to learn from other efforts, right? Like I said, there's a lot of other states that have been able to push through state-based financial aid. There are 5 states that have been able to push, or sorry, states that have been able to push through in-state tuition, and states that have been able to push through state-based financial aid. And so if you want to know how we did it, or how other states have been able to do it, and be able to learn from those practices, that'll be absolutely tremendous for folks to be able to do. But really, it's coming together, right? So if you're in a state that doesn't offer in-state tuition right now, you individually are not going to be able to make that happen, right? It's really about being able to gather and serve as a convener, bring more and more people together to ask and have these conversations together, have students and undocumented young people present, because they're the focal point. They're the ones who are going to be able to know what it's like to be undocumented in that state, in that particular climate, where there are issues, where there are barriers. Being able to utilize those folks and put them in positions of leadership, and then being able to move all together, whether it's with a particular piece of legislation, whether it's a piece of institutional policies, whether it's you want to advocate for opening up more scholarships from local community organizations or community foundations, things like that. Oftentimes they have a tremendous amount of influence as well, things like that. So whole other thing. But for the folks that are very interested, that's why we have our conference. Actually, for anyone who's coming out of state, what we're going to do is we're going to offer a actually special working session for anyone coming from outside of California, and that is going to be our focus, is being able to provide you with as many connections to all our advocates, all our policy minds, how we've been able to do things really, really well, and help you work through what are the best ways to be able to do that in your state. Not just get stuff introduced, but also we also know that in states where they do have in-state tuition or they do have state-based financial aid, there's a whole nother realm of advocacy, which is making sure that gets implemented. Right? We had in-state tuition in California passed in 2001. Students weren't finding out about it really until 2004, 2005, right? So it took us 4 or 5.
Jose, I know that it's 11:31, but we still have about 55 people on, and they are still giving questions, and I would like to just continue on. So I'm going to ask, I have some questions over on the right in notes, but I have questions coming up over in the chat. So right now, do you want to mute, and I'll ask the next question? My husband and I are interested in donating dollars to educating undocumented students here in Texas, but we're not sure how to ID an organization. Do you have any ideas? Okay, this is the next question. Do you know if business can take a tax deduction for sponsoring a DACA or undocumented student?
I do not know. That's a great question. I mean, certainly it's tax deductible if
I
you,
have an
you know,
idea.
if it's a nonprofit.
Yeah. I would say that if there is in your area, your local area, that there's a group that has a scholarship funds that will allow you to donate, which is what happens in my community. I can make a donation to that nonprofit, and that nonprofit can give a scholarship to any student that they want to give it to, and it has nothing to do with their documented or undocumented status. Okay, let's see our next question. I work with students who are on their way to becoming bilingual educators in Texas elementary schools. Would you or your organization be willing to provide them with information that they can take to their classrooms once they start teaching?
Yeah, I mean, we certainly want to be able to support folks as much as we possibly can. I would say that the best when it comes to elementary school students, so we do some work with elementary and middle school students, but we actually find that for the most part, the issue isn't terribly present at that age. What is actually far more helpful is we do a lot of work with parents of elementary and middle school students, and that is actually really, really important. So a source of that is our parent guide. So we have a parent guide in English and Spanish, and I uploaded it onto this platform so folks can download it and utilize that. That is actually where it becomes tremendously important for the parents to be really educated, because as the student gets older, as certain things come up, they're able to know how to have conversations or know where to refer them if they have issues or if they have questions. So certainly, obviously, you have my email if you have any questions or any ways that we can support you all out there in doing, even if it's.
Okay, the next question, what individual or position in the high school is best to offer this service? Academic counselors, ELL coordinators, vice principals, adjustment counselors, etc. Yes, to offer the different the service to students like what you all are offering, the information and supports.
Fair assessment. Yeah, I mean, I would say everyone, right? Everyone is in a position to be able to get this out. If you're a teacher, get it out in your classrooms and get it out to your fellow faculty members. If you're a counselor, make sure your counseling core is all trained and knows how to answer these questions, or at least knows where to go if they have questions. I mean, so many students are just stopped flat in their tracks because they go to one counseling session with one counselor who tells them no, that's not possible, or gives them some misinformation, and then at that point they're done, and we lose them. So it's incredibly important for counselors. If you're an administrator in some fashion, if you're a principal or an assistant or assistant principal or some higher level of leadership in the institution, being able to have trainings for your entire staff, being able to bring speakers to the campus, being able to convene student leaders, I mean, things like that, being able to bring in, if you have local relationships with local nonprofits or local scholarship foundations that give support to your school, being able to bring them in and ask, do you support undocumented students in any way? Do you have any undocumented students? Would you be willing to support our undocumented students from our school? I mean, those types.
Thank you. This is a follow-up question. Well, wait, I'm just going to go ahead and it says, how do you start a support group in high school and who should run it? Okay.
That's one of our workshops at our conference, is how to start a undocumented student support group. So it's really about, at least initially, if there isn't one at your school, it's about building really solid relationships with a few students. So oftentimes students that will identify themselves to you, or you identify yourself and then students come to you, I mean, some type of relationship. And then from there actually being able to pull together a group of folks, pull together a group of students, and then just ask, what is it like to be undocumented on this campus? And being able to bring that have that learning in some way that's recorded, not recorded, but some written form that you're able to utilize, and then really empowering those students to say, in the beginning, we've had a lot of groups make presentations to their staff and say, like, hey, look, this is what it's like to be undocumented at this school. And then staff has been incredibly supportive for the most part. Certainly there have been some challenges, but to really empower them to be their own voice. And then once the students are able to see actually what they can accomplish together, that they can be safe on this campus, and if they're not safe, that they can actually advocate for themselves and others who are undocumented on their campus for it to be a safe campus. And at that point, I mean, probably the best example I can think of is we have an undocumented student group at a high school here in Redwood City, in the peninsula here in the Bay Area, and they do a tremendous amount of work. So their group is about 50 strong, of undocumented young folks in high school, very active. They put together their own scholarship. They raise, I think, something like $15,000 every year. These are students doing car washes and doing bake sales and doing dinners, raise $15,000 a year, which then they turn around and give to the undocumented seniors graduating every year, right? And then they took that a step further and then brought in their parents, and now their parents are serving in kind of an advisory role, service supports. They're the ones who like do the baking or do the cooking for different events, but they also speak in different fashions and help with the leadership. So they have really had a tremendous impact in their community, being able to bring in a whole bunch of different organizations who now are really supporting that group. And because of the work that they've been able to do, because of the educator that's really been able to support them, who's actually been an educator that supported E4FC for a very long time. Her name is Jane Slater. She continues to be the advisor for that group, and they've been able to bring together the entire city.
Okay, we have two more questions. What benefits do students with the DACA status have in states which do not offer financial aid or other assistance to the students?
Well, regardless of the state, they will always be able to get a work authorization, and so they'll be able to work. They'll be able to get a Social Security number, and with that, they'll be able to access certain benefits. As I said before, different states set up what benefits folks will be able to access with those socials or with their work authorization, and they'll have 2 years protection from deportation. So that's guaranteed regardless of what state you're in. And I think what we've seen a lot of states do, certainly Ohio and Massachusetts are one of those states or a couple of those states, is that they've taken that and said, hey, look, we have tens of thousands of students, of undocumented young folks now, who have a work authorization, who have some security really for the first time in their lives, and who want to continue on with their education, with their careers, with their contributions to their communities, who want to get involved, who want to be leaders. And we as a state, having already invested in them, in their leadership development up until high school, need to make that added investment as well. So whether that's state-based financial aid, whether that's driver's licenses and state IDs, things like that. So it's become, in states where there might be a lot of restrictions, we need to open up private scholarships, right? Things like that. So in states where there may not be as supportive of an environment or of a climate or of policies, that has been an incredibly tremendous focal point to be able to use as some momentum to be able to push for those things to change. I think it's always, the biggest thing is the environment is the environment until we work to change it. And there's no environment that is static. I don't care how deeply ingrained some climates are or how restrictive some climates are. all of those things can change. It just is a matter of time, and it's a matter of being able to organize people and being able to put people in positions to really continue to push and advocate. So I don't care what environment we had. Like in 1994, California passed Prop 182. Well, I forget what the proposition was, but California, not so long ago, when I was 6 years old, I was in first grade, passed one of the most restrictive state-based policies in the entire country. We passed with a majority a bill that would deny all public benefit, so schools, emergency rooms, healthcare, all types of benefits to any undocumented person in the state of California. We did that, and we have the largest immigrant and undocumented population in the entire country. So, but obviously now we're probably one of the most progressive and supportive states, and that only took really a matter of a decade, right, or a little over a decade to do and to begin. So I think being able to come.
Okay, this is the next question. People are continuing to chat, but where can we find information regarding policies in our state as they relate to undocumented students, particularly policies related to those wanting to enter college in Wisconsin?
So I'm not terribly familiar with Wisconsin. Unfortunately, I'm sorry. What I'd love you to do. So one thing we are doing is we're actually pulling together a whole bunch of research about that, about what is the environment, what are the policies in all the states in the U.S. as it pertains to undocumented young folks. So I would actually love for you to again shoot me an email, and what I'll do is I'm more than happy to connect you with our policy manager. Her name is Jasmine. She has phenomenal policy mind, and if you have any specific questions when it comes to Wisconsin and the policies there and the opportunities there, I think she'd be in a great position to do that research.
Okay, someone has just asked where's his email. On the left-hand side in the download files, there's a resource document that is there, and his email is in that. Okay, because I just download that one, and you're going to find his website is, and there it goes. He's putting it up again for you. That's easy enough. educatorsforfairconsideration.org. Jose. Okay. Let's see. There are one or two more questions, but I think it's time for us to draw a conclusion here. I think everyone's gotten that. I'm going to move on down the slides now and just say that be sure and download, which some people have asked about that today. And I just want to say thank you. And Jose, I want to just tell you that there's this person may not still be on the line, but this is what they had to say, and it's a way that I want to say thanks too. This was an outstanding presentation, Jose. I appreciate your personal testimony and your knowledge about and resources for undocumented students. That was one person that wrote. Another person wrote, I am going to pull it up right here, but they just wanted to thank us for the presentation and the resources, and very informative, and so I agree with all of them. It's my second time around. It was even better yet this time, so thank you. Let's see. I just want to remind people that you can visit our learning community. It's at www.stemequitypipeline.org, and you can find the archive webinars over under the Professional Development tab that's on the far right. We have a conference also. We call it PDI. It's April 7th through the 11th in Washington, D.C., and you can register at the NAEP site. So NAEP in equity, but you only have one E.org. We look forward to your participation. We thank you for all the participation. This group was great. They were giving suggestions to each other and just chatting, so it was a real delight for me to be a part of this one. If you'd like a certificate of completion, when you do the survey, if you complete page 2, which is not connected to our evaluation, then you can receive a certificate of completion if that will help you with professional development units in your institution. And Greg, I'm going to turn it back to you.
Okay. So what I'm going to put up now is a link to our survey. When I click this Browse To button, it should automatically open in your browser If it doesn't, feel free to click on it and click Browse to or copy and paste it. Also, I know a number of people didn't stay with us, so I'm going to be sending this link in an email out to everyone later, so they'll be able to take it. It's a short survey. As Fred has said, there's also an opportunity for a certificate. If by chance you're watching this as an archived webinar, please refer back to your registration email with a link to the survey. So thank you. This is the end of the webinar.